Welcome to the Plates and PRs Podcast.
We're here to provide you with expert insights and actionable tips to boost your training and cultivate a healthy relationship with food for peak performance and overall wellness.
Get ready to lift, learn, and exceed your limits.
Let's go. I wake up to it.
Hey folks, welcome back. This is Kat.
And I'm Christina. Welcome to Plates and PRs.
Yeah.
I almost said Iron Movement.
I know. But you didn't.
I did it.
Yeah.
I caught myself.
Really quickly too.
All right, Kat, it's been a little minute. How's life?
And life is going well. Dealing or figuring out a new schedule with childcare and what that looks like with work. And there have been some people who have reached out to get some coaching going, to get some the sign up for the free discovery calls that we have, and haven't been able to do that because of my schedule. So sorry about that. It is now fully open. Actually, as of this morning, I have the schedule open. There's a lot more flexibility. So if you are interested in getting nutrition coaching, if you have some questions, and if you can sign up directly to do that, but if you want to have that discovery call, just where we go over some overarching goals, questions, things like that, see what coaching would look like, what option is best for you, that is now available. So check that out.
Awesome. And me, I'm kind of old school. You can just hit me up on Messenger or Facebook or whatever works for you, or even in person. I've had people talk to me, and then we can just set up a day and time that works. So sweet.
Yeah. All right. So today we are talking about just kind of as we're moving into this phase or this new branding and stuff with Plates and PRs, we have kind of a way that we want to start and different main foundation topics, and then we'll kind of branch out from there. So today we're talking about nutrition basics for peak performance, and this is involving general health and also performance in the gym, to get those PRs and overall health and energy, wellness, all those good things. So we'll talk about that. And then the next couple of episodes will kind of pull from there, talking about approaching PRs and then also the role of recovery and what that looks like.
Yeah, I think so many people maybe overestimate how valuable training is, and underestimate how valuable the nutrition and sleep part is. And they will train really well. It's also very easy to get excited about training and want to do all the things and spend hours in the gym. And it's very easy to neglect or not realize how important nutrition is in supporting all of that training. So I think it's really good that we're doing just kind of a basics and giving people just kind of the lowest hanging fruit of what you can do for good performance, right? It's kind of like that triangle. If we think about, at the bottom, we've got recovery and then nutrition, training, and a lot of people can focus on the training and maybe even the supplementation, like those top two things, and they very much neglect the foundational things of sleep and nutrition. So glad we're just talking about the basics and hopefully get people thinking a little bit more about that and what they can do to improve those foundational pieces.
Yeah. And just with it being more of that basics and foundation, there's a lot that people can do with this information to go ahead and apply that on their own. If you do have more questions about because nutrition coaching, sometimes people will think that it is, just tell me what to eat or give me kind of that breakdown and that's it. But it can be so much more. It can be that, but it can also be so much deeper and so much more as far as like application goes. And sometimes it's just helpful to have that outside perspective of where we can kind of make these little changes in your day-to-day life, that's probably really busy and jam-packed already, but what can we do to kind of improve that a little bit? And seeing kind of some of maybe what you perceive as struggles as maybe some of your like superpowers that we can really harness and use that to apply nutrition foundations and principles, but in a more specific kind of way. That's why I like nutrition coaching.
I like
a lot.
that.
Like the application piece.
Yeah. And I also think a lot of people assume when they're getting nutrition coaching, it's a lot of taking things away and restriction. And we know that for a lot of times it's actually about adding things to the nutrition, increasing protein, increasing veggies, increasing carbs even.
Specific kinds of them.
Yeah, right. And understanding the timing and how beneficial those things are. And I think for most clients, they assume that it means we're taking things away. And it might be, we might be reducing calories, but we're increasing volume of food and variety of foods, or even learning how to implement those foods that maybe we shouldn't have all the time, but as part of a nutrition, and like a whole, what am I trying to say? Like a wholesome or like
there's like an abundance of
and there's a lot of people who have that guilt. If I eat anything that they think might not be healthy, it can create just like a downward spiral, and then they fall apart. And learning how to navigate that, and make it part of all just a whole health,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's like shifting from a restrictive kind of mindset to an abundance mindset in a way that still, or that does support health and performance and functional fitness overall. So yeah. So you want to just dive into the macros, like understanding that part of it?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right. So we have macronutrients. They're proteins, fats, carbohydrates. Sometimes people will throw water in there, even though it's not like a macronutrient. Macronutrient is something that food, the big parts of it that provide energy, calories. They provide calories, which is energy. So we have carbohydrates. Those are, if you think about kind of what grows, like a plant, what grows from the ground. So that would include all vegetables. Even spinach, that's a carb. There's very little amount in there, but it's still a carb. And let me go back a little bit. Foods are not, as much as we want to put them in individual boxes, most of the time they're going to have a blend of 2 or 3 of the macronutrients, but we can kind of go a little bit like too much focus on that and then make it more of a chore. We can look at what the main macronutrient of a food is, unless they're like very similar. And we can, for example, like peanut butter, it has all of the above, but typically we'll think of it as a fat because it has more of that ratio wise than the other one. So all right, going back to carbohydrates. So any kind of vegetable, fruits, if you think about any kind of grains, it's also going to be, when we think about another example of something that has all of the above, is milk, because that is something that, a little cow or whatever kind of milk you're having, but that needs to provide all of the essential nutrients, macronutrients as well. And so that's why that has all of the above. But carbohydrates, when I think of carbohydrates, I think about a spectrum, and the amount of fiber is part of that. Typically, when we have more carbohydrates or have that higher amount of fiber, those are going to be some of the best options for pairing together, for putting on your plate outside of training, because those are going to be a little bit slower to digest. They're going to be very helpful, very important for overall digestive health. Those are going to be things like any kind of sweet potato, whether it's sweet potato, russet, or red potatoes. If you get like rice, brown rice, you can still have like jasmine rice if you want, or basmati, those are still fine, but you're going to have more of those around mealtime versus like being right before like lifting or something like that, or right before like training, things like that. The more easily they are to digest, that's when we want to kind of time those closer to activity, because that's going to break down quicker. It's going to provide your body with those carbohydrates, with the glucose in the carbohydrates, and give you that energy. So that's why when we're approaching food, there's not that morality piece of like good or bad, but there is helpful and less helpful or not so helpful. So if you're about to sit down and do a whole bunch of work at your desk, it might not be the most helpful thing to grab something that's going to just quickly break down, spike your blood sugar, your energy up, and then drop it back down, especially if you're just having it on its own. So yeah, it's a little bit about carbs.
Yeah, I like that, talking about that spectrum. You basically have very low carbohydrate, high fiber, all the way up to very high carbohydrate load with very low fiber. And depending on the time of day, depending on your training needs, which one should you more like focus on? And so, if you work a very sedentary job, you do CrossFit for 1 hour a day, you're probably good with kind of sticking to your low carbohydrate to mid carbohydrate range, right? With high fiber. And then if you're, a competitive athlete and you're training multiple times a day for several hours, then a lot of your carbohydrate loads should be that mid to high carb with lower fiber, especially around training time. And so I like how you talk, we always have talked about there's no morality in food, but context is everything. And what your needs are will differ depending on where you're at in life, what your training goals are, what your work looks like. Are you sedentary or are you working outside all day and moving heavy objects? So things like that definitely take into account and have to be thought about for sure.
And I'm going to go on a quick rant about carbohydrates. So there is this kind of push. There's this kind of trend going on. There's always a different trend going on. But right now I'm seeing a lot of and I guess not really right now. This has been forever. But really the carnivore diet and specifically.
Is that back again? Is that making its way back around?
Yes. I see it again. But specifically about its role in digestive health and how here's why if you have issues with digestive health and you go on a very, very, very low carbohydrate diet or like a carnivore diet, you're going to feel better. But that is like an immediate kind of thing that is not helpful and can actually be more harmful long-term. So carbohydrates are really when you think about our microbiome, the healthy bacteria in our digestive system, they thrive off of what is called prebiotics, which are kinds of fibers. And sometimes there can be an imbalance there. And sometimes you can have healthy or like very nourishing foods, apples, for example, different kind of like if you want to like snack on grapes or anything like that, those have specific kind of carbohydrate chains. And those carbohydrate chains can cause some of that fermentation and more of those like digestive related symptoms, gas, bloating, changes in your bowel movements, either more constipation or loose stools. If you take those away, that can help with those immediate symptoms and reducing those. But the longer that you take time not providing your microbiome with food, once you reintroduce those and down the line, that can really cause even more like imbalance and more issues. And so that's just something that I've been seeing and fear of carbohydrates in kind of that specific way, like with the carnivore diet and digestive health related. So don't fall for it. You will feel better, but that's not the approach. Like that's a Band-Aid right there. And can cause more issues down the line.
So as a medical nutrition therapist or dietitian,
medical nutrition therapy.
Obviously we're not diagnosing anyone and we're not saying this is what you should do, but how would you look at this if a patient came to you and said, I'm struggling with this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the FODMAP diet, so the FODMAP stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. You don't have to remember that, but basically
just remember FODMAP, y'all.
Right. Just FODMAP. That is a very evidence-based approach. It is not long-term. It comes mostly, there's so much research about it out of Monash University in Australia. No, New Zealand. Australia. But the impact, so that is divided into 3 different kind of phases. Phase 1, you have that removal of high FODMAP foods. And then phase 2 is testing each of those different categories. And then phase 3 is more of like the long-term kind of what to do about that. So that is helpful again for when in that phase 1, when you're removing some of those carbohydrates, the high FODMAP ones, that can be really helpful for that, change in symptoms. Usually within 2 weeks, people start to feel better, but we'll do that for a max of like 4-6 weeks around there. But at that same time, depending on that person's just their history and kind of their overall intake and kind of what's going on, we might do specific supplements that can help to support that imbalance, or if there's like other issues kind of going on. And so that's really where the medical nutrition therapy, it like that puzzle piece, that piece that I love so much. So we do part of the FODMAP, but we'll also take a more individual look and see if there's other things that we can do at that same time while we are reducing some of those kind of symptoms short term. So yeah.
And then basically after you've removed everything, basically you introduce like one thing in doses and see if it elicits a response.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, person still feels great. Okay, that food's not it, but do you remove that food back out and then try a new one?
For the phase 2, yeah, we'll remove it back out. But then once they're in phase 3, if they were fine with that category, then they're like good to go. They can have that. But the goal is to not, it's not meant to be long term. And so if there is, sometimes there are specific categories that'll be more related to like loose stools or more like constipation. And so and this is one of the reasons why I think it is so important for people who are doing FODMAP diets to work with somebody who is trained in FODMAP diet, specifically from Monash University, which I am, by the way. But there are different kind of like supplements or like protocols that we will do alongside of that phase 1 and phase 2 to help with that phase 3, because just doing FODMAP on its own without like doing anything, then you're essentially taking it away and then like adding it back, kind of thing.
Right.
And so that might be specific kind of probiotics. You know, there's a lot that we don't know about specific probiotics, but there's also a lot that we do know. And there are specific like strains that can be helpful for that person. And that's where, you know, like there's so many different probiotics available on the market, but there are like really, really awesome ones. I go through Full Script, which is a dispensary, and I don't get any like kickback or anything like that. Just it's a way to provide specific like probiotics or other kind of supplements, high quality ones, third party tested and things like that, that I can, you know, send. And I don't get I can't get paid on supplements now. Like with my history, like I just can't do it. But yeah, that would be it. It wouldn't be like a general kind of over the counter probiotic, for example, kind of one. Gotcha. This is also where sometimes, and I just did a video on microbiome tests or stool samples. There have been stool sample companies that were providing tests that have gotten in trouble because the claims they were making were just not like evidence-based. But there are some ones that if, you know, you've been to multiple different doctors and you just kind of get just kind of, you know, told it's just IBS, kind of deal with it, and they've done all the appropriate and important tests to rule out anything more like of an issue, then that's something that we might consider. There are a couple of different stool samples like labs that is not perfect but can still be part of the overall process, and taking into account the whole situation and everything. So yeah.
Okay.
I love it. I love talking about this stuff.
I know you do. And it's really informative because I think, you know, it's funny. I was away doing some Army training and we actually had, I'm sure you're actually familiar with it now. Have you heard of the H2F, the holistic fitness that the Army's implemented?
Yeah. They have, the positions. I was actually like, I thought about applying for that for like a split second.
Okay. Yeah. They have tons of dietitian positions.
CSSD. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So anyway, we had someone come, but one of the things they talked about, they asked people, you know, this was dealing with sleep, but it goes to the same principle. A lot of soldiers don't get enough sleep, right? They get, I think the average in our class, they said they get like 5 or 6 hours, and I would die. But
that's me right now.
One of the things she asked was like, do you feel good on that amount of sleep? And they all said yes. And I raise my hand. I'm like, but maybe because you've never slept 7 or 8 hours, maybe you actually don't know what good feels like.
Right.
Like you're performing, but are you at your best? And so I think about that with stomach stuff too. If all you've ever known is kind of discomfort or like that low level of, whatever, you don't know that that's not abnormal for you. It feel like that's just what it is for you. And so I always ask people, like, if you have significant stomach issues or you feel like you realize it's not normal after speaking with myself or you, then we're going to, like, if they're with me, I'm going to push them over to you as
for
the
that part.
dietitian. Yeah. To assist them with figuring that out, because, they start talking about it and you're like, that's not normal.
Right.
And they're like, oh, it's not. No, everyone else doesn't have this. And you're like, no, actually, no, that's not. So sometimes the barrier to getting that peak performance is just realizing you actually have an issue that you weren't aware of, because it's just something you've dealt with for so long that you just are like, that's just what is normal for me.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't realize it's not.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can run in families too.
Yeah. So everyone in the family is like, yeah, we eat shit all the time.
Or don't kind of thing. And this is one of the reasons why, as much as like I already talk about my issues with just generalized kind of like, MLMs that have these kind of like digestive health, like diets, especially if they have the focus of digestive health, because it is so individualized. And what can be super helpful for one person can have the opposite effect in another. So yeah, and I just really, I love working with people who have, they've gotten all the like endoscopies, colonoscopies already done, and they've been just kind of dismissed. That's the word I was thinking of, as having, IBS, and just kind of deal with it. Those are my favorite, because then I don't have to worry so much about those red flags. And also like we can do a lot there. It's fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Carbs.
Yeah.
And if you take them all the way, yes, you can feel good, long story short, but it can do more damage in the end. There's so many people who have done keto who didn't have any digestive health issues before, and then afterwards just started having it. It impacts microbiomes.
Because that's the thing too, like you're not doing carnivore and keto forever.
Yeah.
No one is.
No.
Like it's not a maintainable long-term diet for like 99% of the people that do it. So I can definitely see that.
Yeah. It's our microbiome, they need prebiotics. They need to be, they need some love. Okay. The next one, protein. So proteins, think about, there's plant-based proteins. Typically, like the plant-based proteins will also have carbohydrates with them. Tofu, edamame, quinoa, even vegetables have proteins in there, but it's the difference is like some of them provide all of the essential amino acids versus some of them who only have some of the essential amino acids. Like rice and beans, those actually together have the essential amino acids, but individually they're still in like the other amino acids that can be still helpful. But proteins, of course, any kind of like
can you explain essential amino acids for maybe some people who don't quite understand what that means?
Yeah. So essential amino acids, basically our bodies can create amino acids on their own, which is the building blocks of protein. But there are some amino acids that we need to consume exogenously. So like from food, we need to get that from food. And so plant or animal-based proteins, those provide all of the essential amino acids that we need, which includes things like chicken, that includes branched chain amino acids. Whey protein also includes branched chain amino acids, right? So we don't have to have those, just as an example, because that was a post that I had on Instagram that I kind of made a note about that. That can be helpful, but if you're getting enough protein overall, you don't have to worry so much about that itself. Protein, when it's important to include on the plate for meals, it's going to help with not having such erratic kind of blood sugar roller coaster kind of outcome. It's going to help with the energy overall longer term. So we have like the quick energy from carbohydrates, more of that stable energy from the protein that's going to help you feel a little bit more full, satisfied, even in the meal while you're eating. A lot of times people feel that they can eat, you know, if they just have a meal full of carbs, they're not really satisfied. They might feel full after it, but they're not really satisfied. And that's where we can really use that protein to the benefit of satisfaction and enjoyment in our meals. And, you know, it's important to make sure that we're getting enough of that. Sometimes there's this weird kind of, so the minimum amount that we need absolutely is at 0.8 grams per kilogram. That's not optimal level. That's like the minimum that we need, 0.8 grams per kilogram of your body weight. The optimal or the recommendation, typically if somebody is not active, which that would not like our target audience, so you're probably not listening, but that would be around the 1 to 1.25, 1.5 grams per kilogram. But for our athletes, we really like to have 1.5 as kind of the minimum, and more of like 1.75 to 2 grams per kilogram, not per pound. That is one of those other things. I'm pulling from like evidence-based, like this, you don't need to have 2 grams per body weight pound or eat like that. And I understand there's also the 1 gram per pound that also gets thrown around a lot, just because we deal with pounds in the US and not kilograms. And it's close enough to that 1.75 to 2 grams per kilogram. But those are the actual like recommendations. Above that, is it going to be as beneficial? Like there's like a, what is that? Like a kind of the exponential, like not exponential, but it kind of like fades out kind of as far as benefits go. It's not to say that it's going to be bad or anything, but it's more expensive. It's not going to be as beneficial. And some of those amino acids can even turn into carbohydrates if your body is like, we need carbohydrates. Like it's using some of those amino acids from the protein. That's why for like a keto diet, there is that kind of awareness that it's, you know, very high fat, moderate protein, very, 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 very low carb. Because some of the carb, if they're having too much of that protein, that can kick them out of ketosis because it can turn into some carbs. And so at that point above those recommendations for protein, I'm always like, what is the benefit for that? If you like it, great. If you're like extra hungry and if you want to have that, great. But yeah, you don't have to.
Yeah, it is out of all 3 of the macronutrients, it's the most expensive. So if you're looking just from a purely like cost effectiveness, you know, eating the required amount and not going like wildly over can be beneficial to your pocketbook.
Yeah. Like we're thinking about Olympic athletes, they're following those same recommendations. The 1.75 2 grams per kilogram. I know in the CrossFit space it can be a lot, you know, thrown out a lot higher. It's not, just try. That's fine. Okay. And then they're also like harder to have on hand. I feel like there's whey and other options to have on hand, but you just have to like, it's harder than having like carbs on hand.
Right.
It just takes time.
Right. I think at least the athletes I talked to lately, I think they're seeing that. When I see these high level athletes, I mean, are they hitting some protein throughout the day? Yes, obviously. Yeah. But when they're in the gym, the protein's not around. It's candy, it's sugar, it's, you know, the pouches, the fruit pouches, like that's what they're going. That keeps them moving through their training regimen. Again, they might be sipping on some protein maybe right after a hard training, but like typically through it, it's, you know, popping gummy bears and Pop-Tarts or Swedish fish, like all that stuff throughout, not, you know, sipping on protein.
Yeah. Most people find it helpful, especially to start the day with, I mean, and it's individual, but typically there's going to be like a range. A lot of people feel good with getting 20, 25 to 30 grams in at most meals, up to 35, 40. But I feel good with that like 25 range in the mornings to have, really, along with carbohydrates and fats. Yeah. And meals too overall. Yeah, we gotta get protein, but sometimes there's too much emphasis on it.
Yeah, for sure.
And then last macronutrient, fats. So that one's also on a spectrum. There are some that are very just like we think about like avocados, nuts and seeds, olive oil, olives even. Those are going to be very helpful. It's not to say that they are, and there is some kind of talk about the term like anti-inflammatory. Like, what does that mean? It's not to say that if you eat what's referred to as an anti-inflammatory fat, that you are now going to be like not inflamed or anything like that. Like, we need some inflammation, right? Like that can be or that is helpful and necessary and appropriate. But it's just a lot, right? Like that's the issue. But it's anti-inflammatory fats mean they're supportive of healthy and desired types of like inflammation kind of thing.
Yeah.
So those are the ones that we want to prioritize, add on to our plates in cooking with either the proteins or the carbs or the veggies, and reduce some of the ones that are going to be more aligned with like, just like more like fried foods and other,
like shortening oil, Crisco.
Yeah, stuff like that. Yeah. There's so many, and I mean like butter is also a great option. I love Kerrygold. It's the best tasting one, in my opinion.
It is really good butter.
They have what is the brand? I think it's like Bakery Tea Co. They have a shirt that has like the Kerrygold on it. I was going to buy it and cut it for a tank. It's super cute.
That's awesome.
But yeah, those are kind of with fats, and those are going to be more beneficial outside of training time. That's going to help us with feeling full as well. Very helpful if you're trying to mass. Of course, adding it can add a lot of calories, a lot of that energy that's needed for building muscle, right? But with small volume. So on the flip side, if you're trying to reduce some of that, change your body composition a little bit, you still want to make sure you're having enough, especially women, men too, of course, but like for hormone health, fats are so important. And again, doesn't need to be, a wild amount or anything, but just making sure that you're getting in. And if you have specific questions on what that means for you for hormone support and health, then, that's a one-on-one kind of question.
And it also, you've talked about this before, Kat, it also helps with the absorption of some needed vitamins, right?
Yeah.
Can you dive into that a little bit?
Yeah. So we have soluble or water soluble vitamins and fat soluble vitamins. So vitamins A, D, K, and E, those are called fat soluble, meaning that they're soluble in fats. And so they're absorbed. Our bodies are able to utilize that when we pair that together with fat. And so just the example I use all the time, if you have a salad that's filled with lots of fat soluble vitamins, and if you're not having any fat in that salad, then you're not going to get as much of the benefit and absorption and second, third order effect utilization of those fat soluble vitamins. So if you are taking one of the kind of recommendations, so if you're having like a vitamin D supplement, if your vitamin D is pretty low, then let's see if you can take that like with a meal or like with some fat alongside. If you're having a snack of apple and peanut butter, then good time to maybe have your vitamin D supplement.
Awesome.
Yay. All right. So those are the macronutrients. For performance purposes, we want all of the above, but closer to training time, we want to focus more so on the carbohydrates and protein, especially if you feel like if you just eat the carbs and it like you feel like a little bit like shaky, like it's too much maybe, or you need some protein to kind of balance that out a little bit. And then, I mean, I know we talked about, I said that sometimes people will throw in water in there just because it's, necessary. It's not, a macronutrient, but it's still important to stay hydrated. And especially, at the time of this recording, we're almost to summer. We're like right there. Feels like summer anyway.
It does.
So, just the amount of performance that can be impacted by dehydration or lack of hydration is significant when we're talking about PRs, when we're talking about wanting to be the athletes that we want to be.
Yeah, and even just acclimating to the heat. If you're working in an air conditioned office all day and then you're going to CrossFit in the middle of the day with no AC, we know that a lot of gyms don't have air conditioned facilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so recognizing that it's even more important during that time as you're acclimating to that temperature difference and the humidity and all of those things. And that can impact your performance quite a bit as well.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And I mean, on the worst case scenario, it can cause like heat casualty issues, right?
Yeah.
So like it's not something to mess around with. Like if you have not hydrated, I would say like that, and you're still trying to like push the like highest, and that's ego based. That is not, that's not cool.
Yeah, not safe.
No.
And definitely need to take a step back. And even if it just means you're going through the motions and you're moving, but not at that high intensity piece.
Yeah.
And again, making sure that you're taking time to get acclimated to the heat and the humidity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I jumped from a morning class to an afternoon class. It was rough.
Oh yeah, so you're feeling it.
Yeah. Yep. I drank so much water yesterday. But the thing was that it didn't feel like I drank so much water. Like I felt good, but
right.
It was just wild how much of an increase that I needed to feel the same.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah, it's very hot and humid here. We're kind of going through this weird thing where it seems to rain every day because of how humid it is here, which just makes it even more humid after it rains. So yeah, and I'm in an office with AC all day, and I'm definitely feeling the effects of going to a gym that's not air conditioned, which is actually a good thing for me. My ultimate goal is to get to air assault school, and I definitely need to get used to performing in the heat and being very sweaty and uncomfortable. So it's good, but it's definitely taken some getting used to and making sure, like you said, I hydrate appropriately, I'm eating well, things like that.
Yeah. And we can get so many, so like if you have a high sweat rate, like you might need to have those electrolyte supplements. But you can also get a lot of electrolytes from fruits and veggies, pickles, even snacking on those. Those are helpful to have.
Yep.
Yeah. And I prefer having, like, I like gyms that don't have HVAC.
Yeah, I like the no AC too. It is,
Yeah.
I like that kind of sweat, but
yeah,
it's a lot.
It's good. Yeah. I don't know why.
I also realize that because of that too, then I get home and then I'm freezing all day too, because that gradient is so large, like 90 plus degrees, and then going to the house and it's 70. And I'm like, even after, taking a shower and putting on new clothes, I'm still
sweating.
I'm like, I need a sweatshirt.
Oh yeah.
Freezing.
It's been like 102, 104 over here. So yeah, it's been, for me, like I'll take a shower and then I'll still be sweating.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you haven't waited long enough. You've got to completely stop sweating before you go take a shower.
Oh yeah, and then get cold.
The body hasn't cooled off yet.
Right. Yeah. Fully cool off first. So yeah, those are kind of the as far as like timing of meals go. Oh, so if you, and this can change based on the person's preferences, but then also the time at which they're going to train. If you're training first thing, it's going to look different than if you're training at 4 p.m. So take that into consideration too, as far as like the amount of carbohydrates that you're having before. Sometimes people before will just have like a piece of toast with like honey on it, or a banana or something like that. Something's going to be a little bit or if they don't like to eat, make sure you're having that meal the night before, maybe add a little bit more carbohydrates, or have a carb like snack before going to bed. You can pair that with protein too, but yeah. There's just, it's going to look different for as far as optimal timing goes for training.
And optimal timing and what you can kind of, I know people who just can't do anything that early in the morning.
And that's
like
fine
it makes
too.
them feel sick or nauseated. And so just kind of figuring out what works for you as well.
Mm-hmm. I wake up starving.
Do you?
Yes. And I have to, I am starving when I wake up. Doesn't matter how much I ate the night before. So
yeah.
I will say also, I had a little note in the podcast notes about a common nutrition challenge. Cravings are a common thing that gets brought up. There are so many reasons why cravings can happen. It can be from physiological needs to more of like mental or psychological needs. Could be like hormonally related. It could be a blend of multiple different things. And so the worst thing I think that someone can do when they have cravings is to just kind of bury that. And there is a time and place, I guess, for that. I mean, there's nuance to everything. But what is more helpful is going through and figuring out where is that coming from, because it can be so easily addressed and maybe fixed if we know what is causing that.
Right.
And so I'll put a link in the show notes for kind of cravings flow chart that goes through questions of did you do this? Is it this? Is it this? Because it is so much more of a just one thing.
Right.
But cravings in general, that's a common challenge.
And a lot of people just think, oh, it needs to be willpower. And again, like you said, there might be a time and place for that. But what if you could be preemptive and not have it in the first place?
Right?
For a lot of them.
That's what I'm saying. Use your like willpower, that energy on something else.
Exactly.
Something more productive.
Way more important.
Yeah. Like just let's talk about the craving and why it's happening. Yeah. All right. And the basics again, this is the basics. This is kind of foundational. Use this to then apply to the person.
Yeah, thanks for all those awesome explanations and dropping the knowledge bombs for us.
I could talk about this for so long. I love this. If you have not, what is it? Reviewed.
Yeah.
If you haven't done that, please do that and subscribe. Of course, share this if you think it's been helpful.
Absolutely.
And follow us on Instagram.
Till next time.
Let's go.
Bye, y'all.
Yeah, this is my life, my strife, my right to fight, to die on. And this is my game to play, to claim a brand new